What's harder, creating a category or competing in a crowded one? Let's talk about it in this episode of Closing Time. Welcome to Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Val Riley, head of content and digital marketing at Insightly CRM. Today I'm joined by Jess Cook. She is the head of content and communications at Island, the enterprise browser, and she also hosts a podcast called That's Marketing, Baby. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Thank you so much for having me, Val. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Jess, there's so much I want to cover with you today, but let's start with the challenge that marketers face in category creation. And what I mean by that is how Drift sort of created that conversational marketing category and how Island is really creating the enterprise browser category.
Absolutely. So I think with category creation, one, it's very exciting, right? It's so fun and exciting to go out and basically start something from scratch content-wise that either no one is aware of, no one has heard of before. There's some competition, but it's really just starting to heat up. The challenge though, is that because it's being created as you're kind of building and creating content around it, the education and kind of the awareness of that thing is incredibly low, near zero, especially at the beginning. And so there's this very big piece of education that has to be done on, what it is exactly that you are creating. And along with that comes a lot of patience. We're talking about, low volume search terms, because if you're creating a category, there's probably very few people actually searching for that thing. And there is a lot to be said for, understanding kind of the tangential problems that someone is trying to address with whatever it is your product solves for. So not only are they unaware of your brand because you're creating the category, they're unaware of whatever you do. They may even be completely unaware of the problem you solve. If you're really creating a category, it's very possible that, your target audience doesn't actually realize they have the problem that your product is intended to come in and kind of save the day on. So it is a big challenge all around, but a very, very exciting one, and one that, is able to be surmounted, as we have seen with the likes of Drift and Slack.
So I'm curious, Jess, I wonder, so few marketers really might have the opportunity across their career to really establish a category. So I'm wondering if you're seeing this as like that you're lucky, or that maybe it's a bit of a curse.
Oh no, I feel so lucky. I absolutely pursued this opportunity. This was something, I've listened to Dave Gerhardt for a couple of years now and his story at Drift. And, I always thought, oh man, that sounds so fun, challenging and incredibly difficult, but really fun. And I love a fun challenge. And so this was very exciting for me. And a little bit of I think you have potentially even more room for testing and failure and learning from failure in category creation, because you're not sure what's going to work. You're out there in kind of uncharted territory, and you have to try things and see what happens. And, how do we talk about ourselves? And okay, that didn't quite resonate. Oh, but this other way, people are gravitating toward that. Let's continue down that path. Right. So, I think if anything, it gives you a bit more permission to try things you might not have the opportunity to try otherwise.
I love that. Let's switch gears a little bit, because I know you have experience also working in established categories. CRM, for instance, is the category that I work in, and established might be an understatement because there are 1,700 CRMs on the market. So we compete with them every day. So how do you approach, working in a saturated category?
I think when you're in a saturated category, everything comes down to your brand, right? You have to have a reason that someone would feel something for your brand over another one that's already there. That might be the most established, has been there longer, has the most customers, right? And I think what goes with that is you can't position yourself as better. I don't think that's the play. I think the play is, how are you different? Are you for a very specific part of a market? Are you for one vertical? Do you do something a little bit differently in your workflow, or, even your customer success team is like built into the offering some way that it isn't somewhere else, right? There are so many ways to differentiate. And I think that's what you really have to look at in a saturated market. And also just your brand. What do you stand for? What is your tone of voice? What is going to build loyalty, right? You can't be saying the same things as everyone else. Again, it goes back to that differentiation. The brand can also be a differentiator. I think if you look at things like, Target is not cheaper than say a Walmart, right? If I were logical, I would go to Walmart, but I don't go to Walmart. I go to Target because they have the best stuff, the cutest stuff, the most interesting collaborations, the coolest, the best toys for my kids. And they're on top of things. And that, that is a differentiator that I would pay more for, right? So I think it's really finding and figuring out what that is and then capitalizing on that in a saturated market.
Sure. Well, our Target has a Starbucks, so, there's another reason.
Exactly.
I think your advice is really on target though, Jess, because, as a CRM, I mentioned we're in a highly saturated space. Our CRM is HIPAA compliant. And though that small little phrase in healthcare means a lot of our competitors are not. So just finding something like not even just the vertical, but like an aspect of a vertical can be a real differentiator.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, that's so smart. And just like double down on that. I bet people, when they find that out, that are in healthcare or require that HIPAA compliance, they're like, oh my, why would I go anywhere else? Like that solves the one of my biggest problems. And I think those are the little gems you have to find of like, what's the thing that's going to sway someone from, there's that whole saying of no one ever got fired for bringing on IBM or for buying IBM, right? What's the thing that's going to sway someone from buying the obvious choice in the CRM market and bring them to you or to, some other kind of niche CRM? And I think you have to find that thing and test the messaging around it, right? Like I'm sure there are ways you can talk about it that are much more successful than others that bring in more interest.
Absolutely. So yeah, in general, just getting into the consideration set, that initial consideration set is really a challenge for us, again, because our category is so crowded. We had some data in a couple episodes of Closing Time ago where it was presented that if you're not in that initial consideration set, your odds of winning a deal are literally just like 1 or 2%. So it's crucial. One tip you had was about using unbranded search or being a side door of sorts to getting into that consideration set.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to those tangential problems. What are the things that your target audience are trying to solve that maybe you don't necessarily solve for them, but you can provide them some value and help them in a way that feels very valuable to them, that will then get them to consider you, at least be aware of you. And awareness is like, that's half the battle in that consideration set right there. If they know, okay, they do the thing I need to do, why wouldn't I take a look at them if I'm already kind of trying to figure out what this right tool is? So unbranded search is definitely a big one. Taking a look at some of the search terms that are, high volume, low competition, but not necessarily, 100% related to what it is your product does, is one approach. Another is, I think there's this big push now to the idea of people buy from people that they like and trust. And we're seeing more and more now companies, finding the right influencers and, hey, try my product out, right? Like do some sort of post around it or be on my webinar, be on my podcast, right? And we share the same values. Like, let's talk about some of the big thought leadership topics that we both agree on. And I think there's something to be said, when you hear someone that you admire or trust in your kind of line of work, talking about the same values, ideals of, a new company that maybe you've not heard of, a tool that you'd not considered, or even like promoting them and saying, hey, this is something that I use and I like and is different that I haven't seen before, and, wanted you all to know about it. So I think there's something kind of both in those realms, and I think they can work really well together. The idea of, using influencers, but also kind of unbranded tangential search.
Yeah, I love that. We call it borrowing clout, right? So
Yeah.
when you are trying to engage with people and who have a following or who are in the same space as you to, just reach their audience with your message, tangentially, I think
Yeah.
that's a great tip.
Yeah. Like
We're
that.
always,
Sorry, I was just gonna say it's like trust by association, right?
oh, that's a great term. I'll have to borrow that one.
Yeah, go for it.
We're always looking for, customer stories, people to say, hey, we love Insightly. And then we were recently asked by a vendor of ours, hey, will you do a customer story? And, there was a slight bit of hesitation. I was like, we have to do that. Like that, we spend all of our time and energy asking people to do
Yes.
that for us. Like we have to, it's like karma. Like we'll put in this testimonial and then it's going to come back to us some way.
That's right.
So
I was just going to
huge.
say
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. That customer proof is so big. That's something that I'm working on right now at Island. Is like, this week I was putting together this giant spreadsheet of like, okay, by vertical, which customers are we going to go after for which, kind of needs that we have and in what order, so that we can kind of start making our way down that list and, knocking them down one by one and building that library of social proof of like who's used us, who's been successful, and in which ways.
Great. Okay, so we talked about a little bit about search terms, using the side door, borrowing clout. Any other tips, Jess, for getting in that initial consideration set?
So I think the last thing really just to hit home is the importance of branding. And I know that branding, some people, in B2B, like your brand doesn't have to be as established. It's all about, the benefits and the features and what it's going to do and how it's going to save time and ROI. ROI is the thing, right? I feel like I hear that all the time. And yes, those are all really important, but I think the thing that helps, a company really stand out in people's minds is the brand, is how it made them feel when they interacted with their content or saw a video, or spoke with someone on the team. Like that is all brand. And so, as someone in content and kind of the corporate marketing side of things, it's really important to instill that in everyone. And how you interact with the customers is part of the brand, and what you say on LinkedIn as a person even is part of our brand, and it really all comes back to that. So establishing those guidelines, like what do we say, what don't we say, what do we stand for, what do we sound like, what topics do we talk about, what topics do we stay away from, what do we have very strong opinions on, and what are those opinions, so that everyone can kind of toe the line together, and really build that strong brand that's going to help differentiate you, get you in that consideration set.
I mean, as a marketer, I'm just delighted that brand is coming back. I do feel like over the last maybe 10 years or so, we got so bogged down in attribution models and data points and tracking and pixels, and all that was great. But, sometimes I feel like we maybe lost a little bit of brand along the way. And so to have it come back stronger than ever, I think bodes well, especially for content marketers, but really all of marketing.
I totally agree. I think it's the thing that, just sets a company apart in a way that is going to stand out in someone's mind, make you more interested and intrigued, and, something you'd be willing to share, right? There are certain brands that I know I'm probably not going to use them in my role right now, but I admire them, and I'm like, they're going to stay on my radar, and hey, someday down the road I might be able to use them, and they'll be the first ones I go to. And that's I think what brand does, right? It keeps people thinking about you. It builds trust in a way that you and resonance in a way that you just can't do with oh, this campaign worked and this one didn't, or the whole like you say, just to review the data. Like, data is great, but you can't pinpoint someone's feelings on a graph. And I think that the sentiment someone has about your brand is just as important as all of that data.
All right, Jess, brand is back. I love it. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
It was our pleasure. Thanks to all of you out there for joining us on Closing Time. Remember, you want to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and click the button for notifications so you don't miss an episode. We'll see you next week.